Welcome to Next Level Humanity podcast. I have a dear guest here, dear Sidney Nakahodo. Hope I spelled that right. Welcome, Sidney.
Thanks so much, Namsha. Very happy to hear.
I'm very happy to host you. We have met with Sidney a couple of weeks ago in Lisbon, and he's the founder managing partner of Selder Capital. And we met very interestingly a couple of times, literally crashing into each other. Yeah, so welcome, Sidney.
Thank you, Namsha.
So your journey starts in Brazil, and then you with the global development work at World Bank, Columbia University, and now Frontier Tech Investing. What early experiences shaped your worldview and curiosity about innovation will be my first question.
Right. So I was born and raised in Brazil. My grandparents are from Japan. So growing up in a developing country really helped me understand the importance of national development and the impact that technology can have in improving the lives of people. I moved to the US about 20 years ago, primarily or initially to study, and then I ended up pursuing a career here and have been working here and living here ever since.
And you do like New York?
When it's not too cold, yeah, yes,
When it's
yeah,
not too cold? Yeah, is it too cold now?
it is. It is, and
Yeah,
maybe this is something related to my Brazilian origins, and
it might be.
but it is a great
Yeah.
city to live in.
Is it a different dynamic when you compare New York and US to Brazil? Of course it is, but what are the differences mainly in the business world, also in life in general?
Interestingly, probably there's no other country in the world that resembles more to the US than Brazil in terms of diversity. It's a continental country, right? So large geographic and extension, people from all over the world. So there are a lot of similarities that people wouldn't think of. At the
Mm.
same time, Brazil is a country of with strong connections with Europe and its Latin
Mm.
origins. Also mean that the way that culture is shaped there
Yeah.
is different from the Anglo-Saxon way of thinking and that we see here in the US, right? So I see those countries as complementary in many ways. The way that you do business in Brazil is more along the lines of developing a personal rapport is very important for you to conduct a business together. Whereas here in the US, we tend to prioritize the business aspect first, and then you build a relationship afterwards.
Yeah, it is exactly the opposite in UK, Europe. Yeah, it's very different. Yeah. Yeah. So you're investing in such a interesting space. My question would be, what first drew you to the idea that humanity's futures lies not only in solving problems on Earth, but also looking upward towards space and space technology and frontier technology? What kind of like, how did that interest start in your journey?
Yeah, I grew up reading and watching science fiction. So my first exposure to space came from literature and also by watching movies. This natural curiosity about the future always excited me. I ended up studying engineering in many ways because I wanted to see a lot of the things that I had read about and that I had watched in movies. I want to see them happen in our reality. So that was my initial exposure to ideas related to space. More profoundly, I have to tell you that thinking about space is something that deeply resonates with a lot of beliefs that I share in terms of our place in the universe and the idea that sometimes we tend to be too selfish, right? When you think about that, we might be the only ones in this very small corner of the cosmos. And part of me would like to believe that if we think in broader terms, that we're not alone or that we are just part of this big whole, we can become less inward looking and we can think more in terms of our connection with others and our connection with something bigger than ourselves, right? I'm not a particularly religious person, but there's this spiritual side that guides a lot of what I do. And the last part it is that we live in a very interesting moment in humanity's history, which is very brief. We're starting to see a lot of developments because of technology and because our drive to push the boundaries that will enable us to not only explore space, but take advantage of all the
Yeah.
potential that
Yeah.
space can provide in many areas of our lives. So I
Yeah.
think this is for the beginning of conversation.
I love what you said, because I think when we just stop and start looking above and start getting interested in the universe, and just the stars and the frontier, it's kind of like it helps us not to be so occupied with ourselves or with our human selves. I think that kind of like helps. And I have met amazing teachers and also some scientists, and I have had some of the scientists in Next Level Humanity, which I enjoyed our conversation about the space and space technology. And yeah, I fully agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think there is something spiritual about it as well, to people who get interested in what's beyond what we know. It's kind of like has this spiritual calling as well, which I am very much familiar with. So were there a defining moment for you when your path shifted from policy to entrepreneurship and then venture capital?
Yeah, I would say that it's probably a confluence of factors. Right? At some point in my life, I wanted to become an entrepreneur, and the idea of helping build something, right, has always been appealing to me as an engineer and as someone who likes to see things happening. Right? At the same time, the policy aspect has always been a very important element of what I've done, both professionally but also academically. Right? There's a side of me that's still connected to policy as a professor, and but the idea of working with space first was happened as a result of an internal search for meaning in my life. To be totally honest, right? I always had this curiosity about the world, about the universe, that somehow wasn't fully met through my work in public policy. Uh, the second thing is that maybe it's zeitgeist, or the fact that we're living a moment where we were starting to see entrepreneurs like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos doing things that only governments before could do it. Right? And I want to be part of that movement. And I believe that through entrepreneurship, we would be able to speed up our path to the stars. And maybe the third element was the fact that when I was working at the World Bank, one of my colleagues, a friend of mine from graduate school, he was working on a project, and he came to the World Bank to pitch me on an idea that was part of that research initiative. They were building a small satellite in a laboratory, and they were looking for support to launch that satellite to monitor the Amazon. For me, that was fascinating, because the idea that you could gather a small group of students to launch something in space, it got me excited. And I started doing a little bit of research on what was going on and how people at that point were building space companies in their garages. So I wanted to be part of it. And that was the beginning of the what we call new space economy. And I thought that, okay, if I wanted to make the jump and be at the forefront of this movement, the moment was right. And this
Mhm.
was about 11, 12 years ago.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is very exciting. And when you look back, what personal values do you think guided you long before capital existed, and how that led you to end up being interested in space technology, and getting excited about founders building space technology in their garages?
Exactly. Even though I have a technical background, one of my passions is studying history. And one thing that we learn from history is that if you're not pushing the boundaries and moving forward, you stagnate. If you think about Earth as a closed system, and we only focus on things that happen on our planet, eventually we'll get to a stage where we'll not evolve. And we need to think broader beyond what the limitations of our existence here. Right? So this one thing that just by pushing the boundaries and thinking about space, that forces us to be more creative, to think about solutions that we wouldn't see elsewhere. And it's also a matter of survival, right? We want to continue to exist as species. The second thing is that from a philosophical standpoint, I believe that if we think farther, we also think deeper about the things
Yes,
that we do.
yes.
Right? So there's this element. I think it's something evolutionary. Right? We're always trying to do things that are beyond our comfort zone, and quite often they are hard, they're challenging, but that's what makes us move forward. Right? So there's also this element. And maybe the other thing is the fact that looking for Earth from space enables us to think differently. I have a friend, he's a philosopher called Frank White. He coined the term the overview effect. Right? This almost spiritual experience that astronauts they report when they go to space and see the blue marble with this black universe from a vantage point, right? And that changed the way that they think about the world, that they think about their lives. That's going to happen with humanity, I hope, when more people start going to space and experience things that will make them less self-centered and more connected well, with the universe.
And the best thing about it, I mean, right, like about, I think, 21st century is you don't literally have to go to space. You can be in space, you know, now with technology. You can literally feel what it feels like to be out there, and that's just awesome. And I had a lovely conversation with Avi Loeb, who is a very popular professor, and he was actually one of my guests in Next Level Humanity, I think in the third or fourth episode, and we met with him a couple of years ago, and we became friends instantly. And he's this amazing guy who just literally is beyond his human self because of all the work he's done. So everything you've said, once we start getting interested in space and what's out there, I think our humanity, ourselves as human, starts shifting, and that's just amazing to watch. You just don't take things as serious as you did, you know, previously. So yeah, that's amazing to watch. So I can understand that, and it's still a new investment area, and it's still, you know, frontier technology. You know, it's still a new area, and it still needs, you know, some patience, some conviction, and the ability to think in decades when investing. So what I'm wondering is, how do you develop this long-term perspective, and how do you invest basically? How do you decide on where to invest? What are the signals that tell you that a frontier tech startup has a potential? And how do you evaluate the risk? Because it's, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a very different investment area than all the technologies that is shaping the world right now. So how do you decide?
That's a very important question. And before I address it, let me just want to make a comment about Loeb. Someone that I really admire because not only is a brilliant researcher, but also thinks outside the box and is not afraid of expressing his opinions.
And it's so much fun. Yeah.
Exactly. And even like not disregarding the idea that we are being visited by extraterrestrial intelligence. I think it's something that a lot of people believe, but probably they are not comfortable in sharing in public. And Professor Loeb is one of the few exceptions. But going back to your question about our investment thesis, like Professor Loeb, we try to think outside the box. And where people see challenges, we see opportunities. One misperception about the space sector is that it continues to be hard, it continues to take too long to develop, and it is too costly and too risky. Right? It is true, but that's also true to many other deep tech sectors. The important thing is that you cannot think about the space sector or deep tech in general the same way you think about SaaS, right? Or some sectors where you have revenue generation curve that's more predictable. Right? With space, the profitability happens from a venture capital standpoint, but in a different way. Right? So what happens is that there's a certain time that it takes for a technology or solution to mature in order to start generating revenue that will enable these companies to become profitable. Right? So it's very important that in terms of a business development time cycle, right, you might delay a little bit this aspect of generating resources or generating revenue, but you can reap higher gains later on down the road, right? So this is one important thing. The second thing is that technology is moving so fast that things that seem impossible and end up becoming enabling factors in much shorter time periods. Right? One example is with rocket launching and SpaceX in particular. Launching things in space used to be so complicated. Only large corporations, governments would do that. But now it's become almost as predictable as any other business. Like you can plan when you're going to launch, at what cost, and costs keep going down, right? So launching things in space has become almost trivial. And when you think about the trends, and things are going to continue to grow much faster from now on. Right? If you keep that mindset in perspective, then you can start making more bold predictions, and you can feel comfortable in taking risks where people would think that things would be too unbearable for them to invest. This is one thing that the mindset of investor of a space investor it is important. The second thing is that the industry is changing dramatically. Right? 15 years ago, just talking about going to space from a commercial standpoint sounded very ambitious and almost not realistic. Now it's trivial. Right? Everybody understands the importance of having a commercial space company because launching a satellite is easier. So, and people see the value of internet connection that because of Starlink, right? So it's the same thing that it's the same mindset that we need to apply. For example, when you talk about the lunar economy, right? There's going to be economic activity on the moon in the next 10 years, and that trend has already started. Right? I look to the past and see what happened in low Earth orbit, closer to our planet, and I can extrapolate that to other parts of space that now, when you think about the lunar economy, it still sounds like science fiction. From an investor's perspective, when you see these different trends converging, it's very obvious to me that that's going to happen. Right? So the technology acceleration, the market maturation, and the third element where I can bring my public policy hat, it is understanding the geopolitical context and connecting the priorities of different countries to their strategy for doing things in space.
And that gives you the long-term perspective, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, a joke that we always make in the space sector, right? No bucks, no Buck Rogers. So you really have to figure out where there's going to be money so that you can think backwards and invest in companies that will take advantage of those opportunities. And one way to think about this is where governments are going to be putting money, why they are prioritizing those sectors. And space is clearly one of those areas where countries cannot afford not being involved.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's yeah, it's a lot happening in that world. And my question is, are the founders you meet in deep tech and space tech different from other tech founders? And what do they have like, and what have they taught you about resilience, clarity, leadership, and what's the difference between those two worlds?
Thank you so much for the question. I love that because, in particular in the space sector, the types of founder that we see are very special. And why is that? First, you have to be brilliant.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And not necessarily like brilliant from an IQ standpoint, right? Of course, they are all smart, but you have to be brilliant as human beings because they could be making $500,000 working for a large big tech company. Right? They chose the harder path. They chose to connect their bigger aspirations to something that is very challenging, not only in the short run, but for a large part of their most productive years. Right? And it takes a lot of courage for them to do this. And I cannot tell you like how much I admire and how much I'm inspired by those founders because they could be doing anything else and decided to do something that it's unique and it is challenging, but it cannot be more fulfilling. And all the space founders that I know, they share this passion for what they are doing. By the way, it's not a passion for the technology because that can be very misleading. It is a passion for this sense of mission that what they are doing is bigger than
Yeah, they are
themselves.
missionaries. I mean, that's why I asked the question because, in my opinion, in my perspective, I think any founder who is building space technology is definitely a missionary. They're after a mission. It's like, it's not about building a billion-dollar company, and it's a bigger vision. It's a bigger mission. That's why I can truly connect with when you say they're brilliant. I agree. They are out of this world brilliant, smart brilliant. They're out of this world brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing that we live in times where there's this reward for instant gratification. Right? Everything happens social media, everything's fast, and people think that they can become successful by just posting YouTube videos. Nothing against that. It's a very different mindset from a founder that is facing the challenge of building something for space. Right? It might take a long time. They don't know if they're going to succeed because what they're doing is groundbreaking. And in spite of all the adversity, they continue to be optimistic. And maybe this is the most rewarding part of my work. I spend most of my time talking to very, very optimistic people, uh, even though life throws a lot of lemons at them very, very often. But no, they still continue to be very excited, and they are very future oriented. In spite of what we see in the world today, they don't lose focus on their real goal. So this energizes me a lot, and this is definitely the most exciting part of how I spend my days when I talk to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah. And you created Selder Capital to back these game-changing frontier technologies and brilliant founders. What larger purpose drives that mission for you?
Yeah, this is a very deep question because I've been a founder myself. I've been an ecosystem builder. And what I realize is that when somebody writes a check, it's not only about providing financial assistance and financial support, right? It is a signal that they provide that they say that they trust you, right? And this trust, the sense of trust, has a psychological impact, sometimes bigger than the money that gets into their account, right? I like to be in that position where I can tell the founder, I'm here with you. I have skin on the game,
I
and let's do
believe in
this.
you. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's do this together. And sometimes that's what they need, right? They are brilliant people. They have all the capability. Sometimes they need a little bit of a push that can take them to the next level. So my role is not different from the role that I play as an educator. I like to think that what I can provide it is this small push and open a few doors that can unleash their potential. The other side of me that is excited about being an investor is the fact that I can manifest my dreams to the projects that I support. Right? And I don't have to stick to one dream. Like, there are several dreams that I'm excited about, and then I can play a small role in helping them become a reality.
Yeah, lovely. It's a beautiful mission. It's a big, beautiful mission.
I
And
think that if you don't mind me saying it,
yes, please.
I used to think that VCs were these greedy people that were just trying to squeeze founders and extract their value as much as possible. And I see that happening still. But I have a much more realistic understanding and I have to tell you more positive because I'm on their shoes now. Because what I see that among investors, and particularly the ones that that decide to invest in space companies, is that they really want to be part of the companies that they are supporting. In the sense that they want to help those companies to develop not only for the financial returns, but because it's a way for them to play a small role in unleash that potential. And maybe founders don't know it, and for the founders who are watching us, sometimes that's a bigger driver of investment than the immediate
Yeah.
potential returns, especially when you're investing at the early stage and investing in people is so important.
Yeah, and I meet more and more VCs who are just there for a genuine, yeah, to be a genuine hand of help, and I see that more and more. So, like you said, there are VCs like, of course, there are two sides of the story. I have met VCs who are a bit, I would say, cold-hearted and only in the, very much capitalist point of view, only interested in returns and all that. And I have also met some amazing VCs who are there to truly support and who even like some of them they're like they have done it all. They have 3 exits or 4 exits and they got everything they need. They're just there thinking, I have 30 years of experience, what am I going to do with it? Help other founders, and they just love seeing them like an educator, like educating people. So that's beautiful. I fully agree. So I started seeing more and more VCs investing in mission-driven companies and impact companies, and yeah, into something bigger than the return. Yeah. And how do you see Selder's role in shaping the emergent space economy and the future of deep technology entrepreneurship? What's your role there?
So Selder was created to help those companies maximize their potential, right? And we want to be with them at the very beginning. I mentioned that one of the most important elements of VC investments is the signaling, the idea that by writing a check and providing support from the beginning, you can help open doors and attract other investors that will be part of a founder's journey. We want to be the first institutional check that will unlock those doors. Right? And that's why I decided to be so specialized, because technology is evolving so fast and there are so many things going on. If you don't develop deep expertise on a particular field, it's very hard for you to differentiate what you're doing from everyone else. And there's also the temptation of jumping to latest trend. Now it's AI, right? Tomorrow might be something else. But by being focused on something that we are passionate about and a field that we understand very deeply, that enables us to provide value to founders to identify the better opportunities and also to help the ecosystem, I think, more effectively. Maybe we will not be writing the biggest check initially, but by being with founders from the beginning, we can certainly help bring on board others that will support the company. So that's our humble but mission-driven goal.
Yeah. And personally, what legacy do you hope Selder Capital, to leave in the global innovation ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a very deep question. I do believe that for humanity to thrive, we need to become a multiplanetary species. Right? And
Agreed.
if we are confined to our planet, eventually there will be something that might challenge our existence. Right? So, from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense for us to continue to push the boundaries. Cellular Capital was created with the goal of helping move the needle in that direction. Everything that we do has the goal of unleashing humanity's potential, and we try to speed up this process of helping human species, the humanity, to expand beyond the boundaries of our planet. And there are many reasons for us to doing that. It's self-preservation for sure, but also because just by thinking in those terms, we can create a more sustainable and a more creative and a more just society here on our planet. So there are a lot of outcomes that are
Yeah.
beneficial to us just by thinking along
Yeah.
those lines. So that's
Yeah, you're
legacy.
you're you're pushing people, you're pushing humanity forwards, like the name of this podcast, Next Level Humanity. You're pushing humanity for the next level.
I hadn't thought about it, but that's totally true. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Like that's the mission we share, I guess. So what as I mean, it sounds silly to ask a professor this question, but I'm gonna ask, what have you learned yourself, and what belief about progress, development, technology have you outgrown along this journey? Because I know from personal experience, just sitting with founders and sharing ideas with founders and entrepreneurs is just it just changes our beliefs and our ideas and about the world, technology, everything. So what have you outgrown, and what have you learned, and what kind of beliefs and ideas have changed for you?
I think it's a very important question because as educators, like, we are naturally curious. Right? And one of the most exciting parts of my job, it is to learn from the people that I talk to, particularly founders. One thing that I've realized in all these years working with entrepreneurs is that their core beliefs matter a lot. Something that I didn't imagine in the beginning. To be more specific, I used to believe that technology in itself should be a goal, and if the founder was very technologically savvy, then they would build a business that could thrive, right? And that's still the case. But what happened is that there are many milestones that founders they go through in their founder's journey where they have to make tough decisions. For example, in the space sector, we talk a lot about dual use. At some point, there's always the temptation of which side of the dual use you're going to focus on. Is it on the commercial and exploration, or are you going to be on the defense and military side? And the more I am involved in this sector, and because of the way that the state of the world today, right, these issues are have become even more important. So for me, it's very important to understand which direction the founders that I invest, they are taking their companies, because I want to be connected with people that share the same values and share the same priorities that I do. Just to give one example, in the space sector, we've seen companies that started as launching companies that pivoted into becoming missile manufacturers. Right? It's a big pivot. It's probably making company more profitable. Yes, but do you want to be associated with them? Some people, some investors are not concerned. For me, it's been a huge dilemma that I've been facing more recently. Right? Of course, everything has unintended consequences, but that's why at some point the founder will have to make a decision, and quite often the toughest decision will be not to follow the easier path on the profitability side.
Yeah, yeah. That needs a different level of characteristic, as you know. That's not going to happen for everyone, but that needs a different, yeah, different characteristics. What I would probably refer to is different values, different value sets, and yeah, and that's I think that's the challenge for I think that's the challenge for deep tech entrepreneurs and also space tech entrepreneurs. I think that's their biggest challenge. Don't you agree?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and this is a decision that is affecting not only space, but other areas.
yeah, sure.
And at the same time, more related to my activities in space, I've seen this issue more closely, and the dilemmas that space founders, even at the very early stage, it's something that they had to start thinking about it much earlier. So that's why we invest in people at the pre-seed stages. That's
And
why
I
this
think with your
alignment.
I think with your experience, because you lived between the intersection of public policy and innovation, you probably have your views on ethical responsibilities of the founders, ethical responsibilities of technology leaders, and your view probably has shaped a lot after you building the VC, right? You probably, yeah, I
Yes,
mean, yeah.
no, absolutely, right. Our original thesis was to invest in space technology that had an impact on sustainable development that could help Earth address its most pressing challenges, right? And that vision has evolved in a sense that we are seeing companies that are doing things beyond Earth, things that are used to sound like science fiction. So there's this element of always dealing with frontier topics. So the space itself, we always mention it, describe it as the final frontier, but frontier continues to expand because even in the space sector, things continue to evolve. What happens that these days, policy is following space or technology much more than it used to be before. Like in the past, policy would dictate priorities and policy would shape things, and then technology would come along.
But now
Be-
it's moving too fast.
exactly. So policy has been always reactive. And going back to one of the questions that you asked, like what drove me to tech and entrepreneurship, it was that's one of the reasons. But I figured out that policy was too slow to react to what was happening in the world, and I'd rather be on the side where things were moving faster. It doesn't mean that policy is not relevant,
Yeah,
but the way
yeah,
that
got you. Yeah, because it's so slow.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
it's happening. Yeah. And what does responsible innovation mean in this era where we're building technologies that might outlast us?
This is a very important question. Right? We cannot think of technology and what we do, particularly in the space sector, disconnected to broader context and disconnected from how we think about society. Right? One area that I like to emphasize it is that if you're talking about democratization of space, we need the space to be for everyone. And as we know, traditionally, there's a huge gender imbalance in space. So this is one area that I think is so important that probably we don't think as much. But I'm proud to say that in Salvador Capital's portfolio, 60% of the companies are founded by women, which
Yeah, I
is,
remember you
yeah,
saying that when in Lisbon when we went. It's amazing,
yeah,
especially because it's space tech and it's a male-oriented environment. That's amazing.
yeah, exactly, right? And the other thing is that if you want to be inclusive, it's not only going to be for a handful of space powers. It should be for everyone. So everything that we can do to democratize access to space, not only for a few nations, but for a larger segment of countries, including developing countries in the developing world. That's the next frontier in space. Right? We're going to start seeing many more actors,
Developing countries.
yeah, being involved. Right? And we think about these broader issues. We'll have to think about responsibly about how we're
Yeah.
gonna be expanding in the universe. Right? Even like as soon as we establish a permanent presence on the moon, on Mars, these issues are gonna be very important from the beginning. It's not like oh, you get there and you figure out okay what I'm gonna do next, and then it's
No, no, no.
we made our mistakes here on Earth, and hopefully we've learned from them.
Yeah, yeah, I get it. And what do you think about humanity's future beyond Earth? And right now, what excites you and what concerns you?
That's a very how can I,
Responsible question.
it is right because my initial reaction is that I have to think beyond my VC hat to answer honestly to you.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna follow Professor Lab's example and taking some risks here. When I say that we are expanding humanity's presence in the universe, what is pretty clear to me that how we define humanity is going to change a lot. Because after a couple of generations, like the human beings that will be born on Mars will be different from the human beings that are raised
Sure.
here on Earth.
Yeah.
Right? So
Even physically.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, remember we talked about, aliens and maybe they are, I told you my opinion about what I think. So it might
Yeah.
be just us, ourselves, and, the future generation maybe found a way. The future generation who are born in Mars found a way to get back in, to the past and right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Right. And what happens like when things that are like these most likely take shape, right? Would that deepen our connection with our original selves, or that will create an even bigger divide? I think that there are two ways to see things, and from a biological standpoint, it's better, right? To have more diversity, because then genetically, like the more we differentiate ourselves, like the more we'll hopefully succeeding in surviving as a species or some kind of variation of our species, right? The one thing that I'm very excited about, and maybe that's too naive, but I think there's hope for this, is that by going to other planets and establishing ourselves in different celestial bodies, there's going to be a need for experimentation on the way that we think about society. And some of those solutions that we'll develop to exist in these different environments will feed back into our planet and will improve the way that we operate here on Earth. Right? And by the way, this is not, I'm not reinventing the wheel, or I'm not sharing something ideas that haven't existed. Just to give one example, when the first pilgrims came to the U.S., right, or what's now the U.S., or to the New World, right, they did things differently from what they experienced when they left the Old World. Right? And some of the ideas that thrived here ended up reshaping their places of origin. Right? And if we think about concepts like democracy that were tested and successfully flourished in the New World, and then they went back and reshaped society elsewhere. I think that's one example of what we're going to see in the future too. Maybe that the type of society that we'll build on the moon, on Mars, we're going to see different ways of interacting with each other, the way that things that society will prioritize, right? Even things like how much trust we should put into technology. I don't know what type of society we're going to see in the future, but what I'm 100% convinced is that a lot that we're going to see on Earth will be impacted by these experimentations that will happen in other parts of the universe.
and any concerns on that?
Maybe it's too much science fiction, but yes, there will be conflict between
Yeah, of
people
course.
who,
Yeah. I
because,
mean, imagine children born in Mars with a totally different worldview, Mars view,
yeah,
and yeah, it's like yeah,
exactly. So the same way that the colonists in the New World, they declared independence
yes,
from their mothership, so to say, right?
yeah,
It's the same thing. Like in a matter of few
yeah.
generations, you're
They
gonna,
will
yeah,
depend. They will ask for
yeah,
independence, and yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's obvious.
exactly.
Yeah. So the next question is, what does being unplugged mean to you, away from venture capital, founders, frontier, everything? What do you do to be unplugged?
Yeah, it's something that I think a lot about it. For example, I don't use social media as much as I should, and as a VC, it's important to promote not only our activities as a fund, but develop my personal brand. And I don't do that because even though I should, it takes a lot of my bandwidth. It would take a lot of my bandwidth. Right? Something that I have to work on, but it's a way for me to stay unplugged. Same thing with these communication apps, like WhatsApp. Even though I'm part of several groups, even my family complains that I don't communicate as much as I should. But the same thing, like my bandwidth is limited. I need to focus on things that are very relevant at the moment, and for the sake of sanity. And the third thing that I devote a substantial part of my time to think on a hobby that's totally unrelated to space, but allows me to forces me to stay unplugged.
What's
It's swimming, but
swimming? Nice. Yeah.
and on a competitive way. So for me,
Okay.
it's so important because it allows me to stay healthy, but also to shift my priorities in sports in general, and particularly in competitive sports. There's a closer connection between effort and outcome. Sometimes we don't see it in other parts of our lives. So it helps me also on a self-esteem standpoint. Okay, if I put the effort, then I will see that translated into performance. And one thing that I really like about the swimming aspect is that I like to think about every aspect of swimming, from physiology, from nutrition, and from strategy, that I can try it by myself and then see how it works and how it translates in a competition. And it's just like focusing on these small things, and I think about the details. Right? It's a way for me to stay unplugged from everything else.
That's a great formula. And how do you stay grounded, especially like when you face complexity and uncertainty? What's your secret, your personal truth that keeps you grounded and centered and calm?
Maybe it's gonna be a cliche, right? But it's my family. I have a small daughter. My wife, she's 3.
Okay, wow, three is the best years. I have two daughters.
Okay.
They're grown ups now. Three is just she must be beautiful, fun, lovely. Girls are
Very,
what?
very bossy and opinionated. I don't know
Of
how
course.
how that can happen at such an early age, right? But I think it's a very important question because, for example, nowadays I have to stop everything that I'm doing at 7:30 because there's a dinner time with family. I have to put her to sleep, and afterwards I just don't have the energy to do anything else, right? So that forces me to prioritize my day. At the same time, I know that I have this cutoff time, and but having the opportunity to focus on my family keeps me grounded. Same thing that sometimes I have to travel a lot, and I try to make the effort, even if it's very, very taxing on the physical side, to in between trips to come back home and even spend like 36 hours flying from across the world just to be with my family for one night, because there's this sense of like I need to be present. We still haven't Technology is still not evolved sufficiently to replace the physical connection, right?
Yeah.
And so this is something that it is challenging sometimes, but it helps me a lot.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. Thank you very much, Sydney. It's been a pleasure hosting you, and we had such a deep, lovely conversation. I didn't realize that it's been around an hour, so I'm going to ask you a final question. If you could offer one message to the next generation of founders building for humanity's future, what would that be?
Let me think for 2 seconds. I think there's a big sense of responsibility. Yeah. Being a founder is so hard, so challenging. And sometimes we tend to overlook this dimension of how important work that they are doing is and how important it will be for the future. I don't want to place another burden on our founders, but it's important for them to be aware of this role that they play in society, because the future generation will be standing on their shoulders. They are the giants that are shaping the destiny of those who will come after us. Right? So one thing that I want to share with the founders, it is that they always keep in mind their responsibilities, not only with their businesses, with their employees, but with society more broadly.
Yeah, and everything they are doing, creating, they are game changers, changing is affecting the next generation, and it's affecting our future. So that's a big responsibility. I love it. It's so true.
Yeah, and I can see like the temptation to do things that have more immediate returns in the short run is too enticing, right? And thinking more broadly
Yeah,
takes a few sacrifices, and it's not easy. So I cannot
it's
blame
not
them
easy.
if they don't
Yeah,
prioritize this aspect
yeah,
of their work. But
that's a
it's
great message. That's a great
yeah,
message for founders and for humanity in general.
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for this lovely conversation. Thanks a lot. It's beautiful. Is there anything you want to add?
No, thanks so much, Nevsha. The work that you're doing is so important, and helping us reflect on things beyond our current moment and our current constraints, and pushing
Yeah.
humanity, the boundaries of humanity. We need to do this more often.
Yeah, we're all doing our best.
Absolutely.
Thanks to everyone who is listening to us, watching us on YouTube, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for being there.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.